Welcome to The PA is In, the show created by PAs for PAs, where codependency with your supervising physician is a thing of the past, optimal team practice is the future, and physician associate has taken the place of physician assistant as the professional title of choice. I'm Tracy Bingaman, and I'm obsessed with redefining what success as a PA looks like and what it feels like. Here you'll find the mindset shifts, systems, and processes I use to escape healthcare burnout and integrate my work into my life. Work-life balance is a myth, and an integrated life where you thrive professionally, not a balancing act, is the goal here. My mission is to help you to grow into a unicorn PA who loves their job, has abundant energy, time to spare, and work-optional financial freedom. The PA is in. Welcome back to Basics. We are talking all things money, and our guest today is Sarah Miller. Sarah, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me back. I'm excited for today. We've talked about all the investing for yourself, and now we can talk about investing for the second generation.
Yes, we've talked about retirement and savings and lots of other things. So if you are just joining us, there are lots of money basics episodes that we have already done. But today we're talking about investing for your kids. I like that we said like kids' futures, not specifically kids' college. So let's get into saving for our kids' future lives and prosperity, education, whatever that looks like for you.
Yes, yeah. And I think probably the first step is to say, make sure your own oxygen mask is on first. So make sure that your retirement plans are in place and you're doing your automatic contributions for that and you're taking care of yourself. And that's the first gift that you can give to your kids for their future, is they don't have to worry about taking care of you in your elderly age because you've already taken care of yourself. So once that's done, I think there's three main tools that we can use when we're investing for our kids' future, and whether that's for their college or just future money for them to use as they wish. So I think the three things we're talked about today are 529s, UTMA and UGMAs, and just a regular taxable brokerage account.
Awesome. So 529s is sort of the best known vessel in terms of saving for your kids' future educational expenses. So tell us about 529s. They're sort of like the retirement funds of college. So let's talk about that and what that means.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think 529s are probably one of the best known vehicles to use. So a 529, every state has its own 529. And the fun thing is you don't have to choose your own state's 529. So Tracy and I both live in Pennsylvania. So we can choose the Pennsylvania 529 if we want, but we don't have to. You can choose any state that you want. And we can link to some resources of kind of looking at different states' 529s are a little bit better than some other states. You can look at what funds is the 529 invested in. So just like your 401k or 403b, that's kind of the vehicle. And then what investments are inside of that. The 529 is the vehicle. What are you investing in inside? So some states have just funds that have lower fees and, and good growth. So the first thing I would say to look at for a 529 is, what are your state's rules? So some states say if you invest, so like Pennsylvania says, if you invest in a 529 anywhere, any 529, we will give you a tax benefit. Usually you get a tax deduction on your state taxes. So it can be any 529, and Pennsylvania will say, okay, your Pennsylvania state taxes will be deducted by this much depending on how much you put in. Some states, like Maryland, I grew up in Maryland, have lots of friends in Maryland, work in Maryland, so I know a lot more about Maryland than other states. Maryland says, if you invest in the Maryland 529, we will give you a state tax deduction. You can invest in any other 529 you want, but we're not going to give you any deductions for that. But you have to choose the Maryland state 529, and we'll give you a tax deduction for that. So I would say step number one is, what is your state's rules? And some states say, do whatever you want. We're not giving you any tax deductions. The end. So sorry if that's you. Still 529 I think could be a good option, but see what your state's rules are and then go from there. Do you choose your own state? Do you look at a different state's 529? And so with a 529, it has to be used for an educational expense. That's one of the limits of a 529. One of the newer things that came out a few years ago says it can be used for kindergarten through 12th grade. It doesn't just have to be college or some sort of higher education, you can use it. If you have a child in private school, you can use the 529 for their private school tuition as, anywhere from kindergarten through 12th grade. But it has to be an educational expense. So whether that's actual tuition, usually you can use it for like books or room and board types of things. Again, you might have to look at the details of the 529 and the college that you're looking at, but has to be education related. And it doesn't just have to be a 4-year college. It can be for community college, an AA degree, online schools. It can be for, if you go to a trade school, your plumber, electrician, any of those trades, 529s can be used for those. So it can be used for a lot of different types of education, but it has to be education related. If you decide to make a withdrawal from the 529 that is not education related, you can still do that, but you have to pay a 10% penalty on the earnings portion of that. So let's say, you're withdrawing $1,000, 500 of that was what you put in and 500 was the earnings. You're paying a 10% penalty on that 500 earnings plus income tax, whatever income tax bracket you're in, you have to pay taxes on that. If you withdraw it for an educational expense, there's no taxes, there's no extra fees or penalties. You just withdraw it and put it right into the, tuition fund or whatever it is.
And it doesn't have to be tuition. So as a parent of someone who's in college now, who we are like finally withdrawing from the 529, it does not have to be tuition. So it can be living expenses. Reasonable living expenses. So it can't be like, oh, their rent is $10,000 a month. No, it's like what it's actually costing them for things like food, transportation, laptops, like things like that, tutoring, things that are related to school. We haven't used it for that because tuition has been taking up the majority of what we have in the 529 for our current college student. But it can be education related expenses as well, not just tuition.
Yeah, I think that's a good point because I think people get nervous about the 529 saying, hey, it's limited to only education expenses. But like you just explained, Tracy, there's what falls into that realm. There's a wide variety of what's included in this. And in a worst case scenario, let's say you withdraw, it's not education related at all. You have to pay income tax and a 10% penalty on it. And maybe that's your choice to do that. One of the benefits of a 529 is that you can change the beneficiary at any time. And I will say a little caveat to at any time, check with the 529 plan. Sometimes they say you can only change the beneficiary once a year, or maybe twice a year. You can't do it every day, but you can change the beneficiary. So let's say, you have a 15-year-old kid and they have their 529 and then you have a 5-year-old child and you said, hey, you know what? I'm going to let my 15-year-old go through college and whatever's left in the 529, I'm just going to change the beneficiary to my younger child before they even reach college and keep growing, keep doing it there. Or you can say, I'm going to change the beneficiary to my niece, my nephew. I'm going to save it for the future, for my future grandchildren. I'm going to, if I don't use all the money at 529, I'll just let it keep growing. And this will be, for my grandchildren. You can change it to you. Put your name as the beneficiary.
Yeah.
And
if you want to get
go
a
to school
UMSC,
for something.
You want to go back to school and your name is on the account, you can, I don't even know if you'd have to change the beneficiary. You would just withdraw it for your own education expenses. But yes, you can use it for yourself.
Mm-hmm. So I think that those are the big benefits of a 529 is you get for most states, state tax deduction, and you have the flexibility of changing the beneficiary at any time, throughout the years, and the fact that it can be used for a wide range of what's included in educational expenses. And one thing that I remember talking to someone about before with a 529 is, let's say your child gets a scholarship. How does that play into it? And so again, check with your, specific rules for your 529. But usually if there's a scholarship involved, number one, you can just let the money sit there and change the beneficiary. But number two, you can usually withdraw the amount of, they got a scholarship for $20,000. You can withdraw $20,000 tax penalty free because this was, counts as the scholarship offsets it. So that's something that, to not worry too much about. People worry about overfunding a 529, but there's a lot of options that you have here.
And most people are not overfunding education. Let's just go ahead and say education is insanely expensive and it inflates faster than anything else. So when we say like, oh, inflation rate is up, the cost of education has inflated faster than any other item ever. And I don't see that changing anytime soon. So if you are listening to this and you have a 2-year-old, it's going to be incredibly expensive to send them to school. We did do an entire episode on how to pay for college. We had a guest who has a book, How to Pay for College. And she talks about sort of things that we've covered, prioritizing your own retirement and well-being. Also, really important reminder that it is not your job to give your kids every single possible option in terms of school. I think that we feel like we want them to have every option, but what is reasonable within the budget and what is going to set them up to be successful for their own financial future? And that is typically not hundreds of thousands of dollars of student loans for an undergraduate degree.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that guest was Ann Garcia. And I liked how Ann talked about in there of including your children in these conversations. When they, at least middle school age, I would think, definitely by high school, up to say, here's the family budget and your choice of how detailed you get with those exact numbers, but included, hey, here's what we're setting aside for your college. And here's reasonable expectations of what you can choose from for college, getting them included in these conversations. And it also gives them a good money foundation, for them to learn as they go on.
Yeah. I mean, we've had conversations with our young kids. Like our kids are elementary school, and when their statements come in the mail or when grandma gives them money for their birthday and they say, "Where did my money go?" We say it went in your college fund. And then they say things like, "Can I use it to buy a Cybertruck?" And then we say, "No, it's for college." So, it is to plant the seed that they will likely go to college. But if they're not going to, we'll use it to help them start their lives, but also that they know that we're setting aside money for that as a part of our family's plan for their future. I think that's super important. And we will link, that episode is 259, the one with Ann Garcia as a guest, How to Pay for College. And we'll link that in the show notes so that if you are in this and you press play on this because it was investing for your kids' future and you want to dive more into saving for college, how much and where, that's another resource for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think to take a step back before we talk about other vehicles to use, starting to talk to your kids about money by 3-4 years old, technically maybe younger if you want to throw in some things, definitely by 3 or 4, because studies have shown that kids' money mindset and their foundational thoughts about money are set by the time they're 7 years old. So whatever they might have picked up, you intentionally told them or maybe unintentionally passed on to them, by 7 years old, they have their foundational mindset around money. So start very young talking to them about money, budgeting, basic, child appropriate levels, why we save, why we invest, kind of where the money goes. It's important to start talking about them when they're very young. And then they'll be better set up to have, conversations about college when they get into middle and high school. And like you were saying earlier about, the exponential cost of college. So yes, I agree with you. When people say they're so worried about overfunding a 529 and what am I going to do with all the extra money that sits in there, I just have a hard time believing there's going to be hundreds of thousands of dollars left over in your 529 after all your children have gone to college. Maybe that is your case. I think that will be rare and will be the exception. And if maybe a more valid concern that people have is, hey, the exponential cost of college is an American problem. What if Congress changes the rules around college tuition and makes some sort of federal law and, something involved? If that happens, great. And number 2, then people are like, oh no, I have all this money saved in the 529 that now I don't need because there's some new law about how college is paid for. I think if Congress goes to that extent of making massive changes on the education system of America, that will be included is to say, hey, I have my giant 529 account. I bet that they would include in their massive changes, you can withdraw this money tax and penalty free now.
Love a great side hustle here. If you've been looking for a flexible way to earn extra income without picking up more shifts, my friend Bree Retzner has something worth checking out. She's a PA and recruiter working with a telehealth company in a 1099 role, sharing compounded GLP-1s and soon to launch products like hormone replacement therapy. It's not an MLM, simply referring potential customers, and it's free to do. And Bree will teach you exactly how to do it. You can find her email, number to text or call, and the link to sign up in the show notes. There will be a provision for this. They will not just leave you hanging. Yes, for sure. I think that's I think that's unlikely to happen between now and when the people with young children who are funding their college funds are, so I think honestly, I see that a lot in some of these money forums that people are like concerned about overfunding. And I think that's probably an excuse to not do it, or an excuse that you're not sure about it. So do some research, do your own research, decide what's best for you, which is true for all of the advice that we have given in all of these money episodes. But also something that we did when our big kids got close to college was we continued to save, but we didn't put it in the 529 anymore. So we had reached the point where if our kid went to an in-state school, they were fully funded. If they went to a private school with a decent scholarship, we were kind of getting close to the point where they were funded. So for the last, I would say like 2 to 5 years before they started going to college, we stopped funding the 529s, left the money that was in the 529, which continued to grow, and just saved in a high yield savings account with a bucket with their name on it for expenses that, first of all, it was, if you listen to the last episode that we did, it was sort of more of a short-term goal than a midterm goal. So I didn't want it invested. What if the market fluctuated and we needed to pay tuition that semester? I didn't want the volume to be down. But also I wanted for us to have some flexibility if there was something that we wanted to help them with that wasn't strictly an education expense. One of our kids might not go to college. We have 5. Statistically, it's probably unlikely that every single one of them is going to go the traditional 4-year university route. And having some money saved for their future outside of a 529 just seemed diligent to us. And just because you've been funding a 529 aggressively or not aggressively, if something changed, you could immediately stop your automatic withdrawal and just save for that kid outside of this vessel. The world is not going to end. It's like a set it and forget it, but don't really forget it. Like, keep paying attention and decide what's best for you based on that.
Exactly. I think that's a good point, is that no matter what vehicle or option you might choose to save for the future, for college, whatever you choose, you don't have to choose one and this is it. That's your one decision and you're stuck with it forever. You can choose multiple things. You can do a variety. You can mix and match. So I like the approach that you did of a 529 for the vast majority of it. And then, hey, it can just sit there, keep gaining interest and growing, but we're going to put any new contributions into just a regular high yield savings account, which has a lot more flexibility and options. I like that.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk about saving for setting our kids up for money we want them to have. That's either for education or not for education. It's my personal view that 529s are a really great way to save for educational expenses. But if you're building generational wealth, if those 529s are, set up, if for some reason you have a kid who's not going to take that traditional route or you don't think is, ready for college, let's talk about UTMAs and UGMAs. What great acronyms for these. So tell us what those are and what it means.
Mm-hmm. So UTMA or UTMA, UGMA is a UGMA, and UTMA is a Uniform Transfer to Minors Act. UGMA is a Uniform Gift to Minors Act. To me, they're basically one and the same. And they both can have stocks, bonds, cash. You can invest in those with both of them. And UTMA, with the Transfer to Minors Act, you can also put property in there, real estate, art. So kind of those other types of investments can also go into an UTMA. But basically, these are vehicles where you can contribute money, invest them in stocks, bonds. In the UTMA, you can throw in some real estate. Let these things grow over time. You can use them for educational expenses. One of the bigger pros to the 529 is you could get a state tax deduction. With an UTMA and UGMA, you can't get any tax benefits of any kind, but there's no restrictions on use. You can use them for college or you can use them for anything. You can use them for a wedding. You can use it for a new car. You can use it for a down payment for their house. If they want to start their own business and they need cash flow to open a business, they can use it for that. They can use it to take a trip around the world. You can use it for whatever you want. So that without having restrictions, that's one of the benefits that people like for this. You cannot change the beneficiary on an UTMA or an UGMA. Like with a 529, you can have the same account open and just change the beneficiary name. You can't with an UTMA or an UGMA. When you choose the beneficiary, that's it for life. That's it forever. You can't change it. You can open multiple, if you have 5 children, you can open 5 different UTMAs and they each have their own, but you can't change the beneficiary name later or down the road. It can affect financial aid when they're applying for financial aid because this counts as an asset in their name. And one of the things that, to me, I think is a bit of a con, some might not feel this way, is that the child gains control of the money at the age of majority, whatever that is in your state. So it's either 18 years old or 21 years old. Different states are a little bit different. So with a 529, even though your child is the beneficiary, you control that account. You have control of what money comes out and where it goes. With an UTMA or an UGMA, once your child is 18 or 21, they have complete control of the account. You have no control over it anymore. So hopefully, over the past 18 to 21 years, you've been instilling good financial habits and education in your children, and they use it, with good prudence and in appropriate ways. But potentially, you might have an 18-year-old who says, you know what? I'm buying a Ferrari. I'm taking all the money and I'm doing something crazy with it. Like, this is just such a waste of money, that they, get invested in something super crazy and doesn't make any sense. That's the risk that you run of letting an 18-year-old, and who knows how much. Hopefully you have $100,000, a couple $100,000 in this because you've been contributing regularly, automatically every month. And that could just be a lot of money to give to a young adult with free reign. So just something to keep in mind and think about. That being said, like my parents opened an UGMA for me that I had, my whole life growing up. And I will say, from my own personal experience, maybe everything a little bit different. When I took control of the account, it wasn't like I could log in and spend the money that day right away. I had to get paperwork notarized. My dad had to sign stuff. We had to send papers back and forth, and then it had to be transferred to so there was a process involved before I got real access to the money, but totally it was mine to do what I wanted with.
Yeah, which I think is just an important reminder. There's a couple things I want to say about that. 18-year-olds are not known for their amazing frontal lobe development and incredible decision making, right? Like, this is a set of people that, although technically, legally, they are of the age of majority, they're not someone that we would consider like mature adults. And also, it's just an important reminder to be talking to your kids about money. Like, where does money come from? One of our kids asked me, we should probably do an episode specifically on teaching kids about money and habits and work and things like that, because I feel like I'm so intentional about that. And the other day, one of my kids said, so how does it work? Like, you just go to work and they give you money? Like, I was like, well, yeah, I go to work and I provide a service and a value, and then they give me money for it. And they're like, oh, okay. And we are very intentional about talking to them about money. And when they work in the yard, they make money, and our kids are on commission for various jobs. And so I feel like we had been hitting that pretty hard in terms of, if you work, you get paid. If you don't work, you don't get paid. Money comes from work. And then one of them asked me that, and I was like, how do you not know this already? Like, we've been practicing this. Remember that time you raked leaves and then we gave you money? Like, that's how money works. So just whether you have an UTMA or an UGMA or not, eventually your kid is going to be in charge of their own finances, and you will hopefully be there to guide them, but start having those conversations sooner rather than later. I think this is so important, whether you feel amazing at money or you feel like you do not know what you're doing. Like, if you do not know what you're doing, say to them, hey, I am, 35 and I don't know what I'm doing when it comes to money. I don't want you to be in that situation. So, like, let's learn together. Let's figure it out, because that opens the door for them to know that, like, you cannot live life without money. So this is something that everyone needs to figure out eventually. So might as well start while they're young. And that is my soapbox on talking to kids about money.
Yes, I agree. Because even if you think, like you said, Tracy, you talk about it regularly, it's just part of your regular conversations, family life, your kid will still come up to you and say the most bizarre thing. And you're like, what are you talking about? We've talked about this the entire 12 years you've been alive. Like, what are you talking about? What happened? And why it's important to keep having these conversations. Like, I remember hearing about, how many times have you had to tell your child, you need to eat your vegetables, stop picking your brother, you need to wear underpants every day, say please and thank you. You need to tell them apparently every single day, because they forget every single day. So for important conversations, like money, you need to keep having these conversations regularly.
Yeah. Yeah. And model the behavior that you're looking, for them to have in terms of spending, in terms of, wisely investing, having conversations with them at age appropriate. I don't think you should give your 9-year-old access to your Fidelity account, right? Like, let's talk about like reasonable. Your kids don't necessarily need to know how much money you're bringing into your household, but they do need to know the general, like, money comes in, it costs us money to feed you and put gas in the tank and do these various karate, like things that you enjoy. Those things cost money. And it's not to stress them out. It's to help them be prepared for when they're out in the world. Like, this is how life works. And that's our job, to teach you how life works.
I think also to call yourself out when you make a mistake. I think kids appreciate that. Learn from my mistakes, don't make the same ones. And you're not trying to be I'm on a pedestal, I do everything right, and I've always done everything right. Especially I feel like when you get to the preteen teen years, if you can call yourself out and say, I made a mistake here, here's what I should have done, here's what I'm learning, here's what I'm going to do in the future, your kid is going to appreciate that and learn so much from that. So, and again, at age appropriate levels, like, make sure that you're not scaring them or making them think we're going to be destitute and we're losing the house, like, at an appropriate, but say, hey, you know what? I spent money on this and I should have bought this instead, or I bought a low quality item or whatever, at an age appropriate level, but say, hey, here's something I probably should have done differently and what I'm learning from it.
Yeah. I mean, we were at the store the other day and I realized we don't take our kids shopping very much because we do a lot of our shopping online. And so my daughter was like, I see all these things that I want. Like, she was just walking around the store like, look at this cup, look at this brush, look at this unicorn pillow. I mean, it was just like everything. I was like, it's like she'd never been out in the world before. Like, she was just like, I want all of this. And I was like, well, it's nice that you want that. We're not getting any of that. And here's why. That's not what we came here for. If you want one of those things, you're welcome to save up your money. You could put it on your list for your birthday, if those are things that you do really want. And it's just a good opportunity to talk about, like, what's a want versus a need, right? She's like, I need this unicorn. I'm like, me, you want it, right? So, like, there's a difference between things that we want and we need. And we're in a position where we can buy plenty of things that we want, but simply because we want it does not necessarily mean we're going to buy it today.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a good conversation to have. And an easy one, I think, to have with very young kids of wants versus needs. It's something more simple that you can start introducing at a very young age if you feel overwhelmed of, what do I start with? How do I teach my kids everything about money when they're 3 years old? Like, wants versus needs, I think, is a great starting point. And I think you bring up a good point that can be hard for parents of our generation in the 21st century. It's 2025 now, that we do so much online shopping, that our bills are automatically paid online, like regular, like, it's not like I remember my mom sitting down at the kitchen table, writing a check to the electric company every month, writing a check to the mortgage company. And that brought up money conversations of, here's bills we pay. And I remember grocery shopping with my mom and her teaching me of, the price differences and how to look at unit price. And that's how you really decide, like, what's the better price here. Talking to me, like, that's how she taught me how to, when she would pay with her credit card in the cashier, about, you have to, now she taught me you can only pay with your credit card what is actually in your bank account. Like, if you have $100 in the bank account, you can't buy this $200 thing. You just can't. And that's how I learned good credit card skills and had trouble understanding what credit card debt was, because I thought you could only pay with how much money you
How do
had
you
in the
get in debt,
bank.
though?
Exactly.
Which I guess is a
So,
good problem to have. If your parents were to
exactly.
overeducate you on anything, it's like, it helps you stay out
Yes,
of
yes.
trouble. But
So I
yeah, I
think
mean,
we
it's
have
such
to
an
be super
interesting point.
intentional. We have to be so much more intentional now that we're not regularly doing these things with our kids. Like, I do grocery shop with my kids fairly often. I have yet to jump into the realm of, like, online grocery shopping when they just put it in your car or deliver it to your house. It does sound great. I know. It sounds good. So I at least do bring my kids around that and have the same thing of, they're throwing everything and, let's get this, let's get this. And, okay, no, we're not buying all these things today, and have these conversations. But it's hard because you have to be so much more intentional because we're not regularly physically handling cash, handling money, writing bills. Yeah. Paying things.
Yeah. And it's so interesting because I do think my kids often see me doing things like reconciling the budget or paying bills online. But when I'm on my laptop, I could just as easily be drafting a podcast episode or doing something else. Like they don't know what I'm doing. It's a much less physical practice. Like I too can remember my mom had a check, like a register for her checkbook. And like every time she spent money, she would write it in the check register. Like even if she spent cash, I think she like wrote it down. And it just, me thinking about that experience as a kid watching her, I remember being like, oh, this is on purpose. This is intentional. This is an action that she's doing. My kids see me tapping, swiping, buying things with my phone. Like it's just so much less concrete of how money is being spent. And and I feel differently about this now than I did probably 10, 15 years ago. Because 10, 15 years ago, I was using more cash and doing like the envelope system when we were paying off debt. I think kids do need to know how to manage money electronically because if we think we don't use cash now, like call me in 20 years, call me in 50 years. Cash is not obsolete, but it's not going to be something that kids are normally paying. Like even now, like I will say to our big kids, like, can I give you money for gas? And they're like, just Venmo me. Like, I'm like, okay, okay. Like, you don't want these 220s? You want me to Venmo you $40? They're like, yes, I do want you to Venmo me $40 because I don't want to go in to pay for my gas. I'm like, okay, weird, but fine. Like, it's a totally digital world. So like, we need to talk to them about that. Like, this is how you check your bank account balance on the internet. This is how you stay safe in terms of where you're purchasing on the internet, like verified sites. There's so much. We should definitely do a separate episode about this.
Yes, yeah, there's so much, but I agree. Yeah.
All right, let's talk about the third way that we can transfer wealth or set aside money for our kids.
Mm-hmm. The third way is just a regular taxable brokerage account. And a taxable brokerage account sounds like a weird name, but it's a brokerage. It's a brokerage account. So you go to a brokerage firm like Fidelity, Schwab, Vanguard, and open up an account and just say, I want to invest this money. And so you're investing it into the stock market or bonds or whatever investment you choose. And it's taxable because you have to pay taxes on it when you withdraw this money. There's no state tax deduction. There's no limits on, what it can be used for, college versus not. So if you just want like a completely free range, use this money for whatever I want, whatever I can think of, gift it to my children whenever I want, use it for whatever they might need. A taxable brokerage account is just kind of a free for all. You put money in there, there's no restrictions, and it also stays in your name as the parent. This is your account. You've opened it in your name, but you can kind of earmark it and say like, this is Billy's money, this is, and depending on what type of taxable brokerage account, you might be able to do different buckets of say like Billy's money, Sally's money, or you can just open two different accounts and say this one, kind of earmark it in your mind, like this is money set aside for them. And this is one of those, long-term savings goals that we talked about before of saying you can open this when they're, when they're bored, when they're 5 years old, when they're 10 years old, and just say, I'm going to put this money here. It's going to grow every year. And again, you can use it for college if you want, use it for you. And you have some financial aid concerns or not concerns, but thoughts, it's going to count as money when you apply for financial aid, but you can use it. You can use it for college. You can use it for their wedding. You can use it for a down payment. You can use it to buy them a car when they're a teenager. I mean, you can use it for whatever you want, whenever you want. You can just gift it to them. Happy birthday to you. You can give it to them when they're 20. You can give it to them when they're 35. Whatever you can, in full or in partial, whatever you want to do. So there's really whatever you want to do with it. In the same vein, you could also open a high yield savings account. Like you were saying before, Tracy, of just open their own high yield savings account, that's earmarked for them, or have a bucket inside your own high yield savings account. This bucket is for Billy here, but that's not going to gain a lot of interest and really grow very much over time. So if you're thinking this is long-term growth, this is something, for them for their future, and you really want to get the growth and the interest, you want to invest in the stock market, like in a low cost index fund. And that's where a taxable brokerage account comes in.
So just for anyone listening who's like, taxable brokerage account sounds bad, right? Like it's taxable. That just means that it is not in a tax sheltered account. Example of tax sheltered accounts are 529s, our 403Bs or 401Ks, anything that is in a vessel, that means that you don't pay taxes on it or that it gives you some tax benefits, that is sort of sheltering it from taxes. A taxable brokerage account is just investments outside of retirement, outside of a tax sheltered vessel.
Yeah, exactly. It's not really that scary. Like when you get a paycheck from work, that's taxable. Taxes came out of that. And it's just your regular money. So it's just a regular account. There's no fancy retirement, tax sheltering savings on there. But if you just want to open a kind of a regular account, invest some money in there, invest in the stock market, that's what this is.
Yeah, awesome. So any last thoughts as we're wrapping up on investings or savings for your kids' futures?
I think those are the three big ways. You can do a regular taxable brokerage account, 529s if you're really looking specifically for education. UGMAs can be good options with less restrictions on what it's used for. And like I said, I think that we need to do a whole other episode on teaching kids about finances and money and giving them a good foundation in education from a young age, so they're able to appropriately use this money when they become a young adult.
Yeah, start talking about money. It's so important. Also start talking about puberty, but that's like a topic for another episode.
I was going to say that quote I heard about, like, you got to teach your kids, every day you're telling them, say please and thank you, eat your vegetables. So it's kind of a regular conversation. You got to teach them about puberty and sex and all these things, regular stuff, money, all these big, scary topics. But as parents, I think that's also our job, is to do big, scary things. And you just got to do it because you are a parent and you're going to be the best one to teach your children all of these things.
Yeah. And I think the thing about those big, scary topics is they feel big and scary to us because people didn't talk about them a whole lot. So if we are talking to them about these things, I think that our kids will not think that puberty and money are big and scary if it's sort of a normal part of conversation, because it won't seem so weird. It'll just be normal. So
yeah, that's such a good point.
Awesome. All right. Well, we have a couple more episodes in this series. If you have questions for us, if you have money questions, if there's something that you would like us to cover, send us an email to themoneypa@gmail.com. We do have a Q&A episode coming, so we'll answer your questions there. But if you're like, I don't know how insert money thing here works, send us an email and maybe we will do an episode about it. So Sarah, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. See you next time.
Congratulations. You've just joined an awesome club. By listening to a full episode of The PA is In, you are officially on the Unicorn PA team. Welcome aboard. What most team members do is they subscribe to the podcast because that allows them to automatically get the latest episode of the show. The life of your dreams exists on the other side of taking action. Keep making small shifts and keep getting better. Your life will improve, your career will soar, and you will have the confidence you need to create your own success. I will see you in the next episode. This PA is out.